Welcome to Type Tune Tint. I'm Tom Kranz. Bullying bosses are a problem for millions of American workers. Have you had a boss who crossed the line from bad to bully? Today's guest knows all about it. Andy Regal's experiences with some of the most toxic bosses on the planet opened his eyes to work environments that too many of us have had to endure. His new book, Surviving Bully Culture, shines a light on workplace bullying and what you can do about it. And I'm joined by Andy Regal from his palatial estate in Westchester, New York, a suburb of New York, north of New Jersey, where I am here. As my dear audience knows, I have my command center here in Fanwood, New Jersey. Andy, thanks for being with me, first of all, and good morning.
Tom, it's a privilege to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. So we're here today. I just finished reading Andy's book. This is your first book, by the way?
It is, yes.
Yeah. So his book is called Surviving Bully Culture. What's that all about? So, I think all of us at some point in our lives, those of us who are, well-heeled adults anyway, have worked for bosses or in workplaces that you could call dysfunctional, or had, maybe a boss who was, not the ideal person you want to work for. I don't think it ever occurred to me to call any of those people bullies, though. And I think that what really attracted me to Andy's story here is that this is a word that actually fits very specific individuals who some of us have worked with and worked for. And we'll get more about that in a minute. I first want to get some of your bona fides out of the way here. So you had a 30-ish year career in the television business, both news and entertainment. You were like the first producer for Morton Downey Jr., one of the pioneers of in-your-face yelling and screaming TV. I think a number of our audience are not going to know who that is because they're too damn young.
Yeah.
And then you worked for a long time for Court TV. You worked for CNBC, MSNBC. You worked for the Wall Street Journal in their video department, which I can only imagine bringing video into the Wall Street Journal, this well-heeled institutional of journalism. That was probably a rocky road. I'm just wondering if that happened at the New York Times as well. But you did that.
Yeah.
And you worked for something called College Sports Television, right?
So I spent some years in video production in sports, yes.
Right. And in every step of the way here, almost every single job you encountered somebody who you now recognize as a workplace bully. So, along the way, and then since then, you've now become an advocate for things like changing laws to address workplace bullying, not just workplace harassment, which is dealt differently. That's
correct.
Sexual harassment and all that stuff, but just kind of bullying. I guess the question that kept coming up for me while I was reading is, where do you draw the line between a boss who's just kind of an asshole and actual bullying? Is there a line, and what is it?
Yeah, and that's one of the issues that have come up over the years. And so I have a very strict and I think pretty simple definition of bullying. And it goes into why bullying is legal and a lot of things we'll get into in this conversation. My definition, very strictly, Tom, is repeated and targeted behavior that has no benefit to the employee or the business. So I'm not advocating or looking for some utopian environment at work. It's work. And I was a leader. I was an executive producer at the places you discussed. I was global head of video at the Wall Street Journal. So I'm not looking for everybody to be nice and put their arms around each other in a kind of kumbaya way. No. But when the behavior, when the management, when the conduct is targeted at somebody and repeated, and there's no benefit, and I can give you anecdotes and you've read them in my book, that's when I find that it's injurious, it's damaging, and it causes physical, psychological, and emotional harm.
Yeah, so we're talking about really extreme shit here, right? We're not just talking about, an occasional show of temper or something. We're talking about actual effects that can affect you mentally and physically. I mean, you have multiple instances in your book when you actually vomited at work because of the tension and the stress and the way you were treated. Do you think, and this has occurred to me multiple times during my career in broadcasting, do you think that business, whether it be entertainment or news, attracts a certain kind of boss who is just over the top like that? Or do you think this happens across the board in all kinds of workplaces?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll tell you, Tom, what I thought at the time when I started writing my book about 5 years ago during COVID, and what I know all too well now. I thought when I moved to New York for live television that I'd kind of asked for this. Biggest media market, high tension, pressure, deadlines. So I asked for it. This is what I wanted. And it was kind of that thing to be gendered as, hey, dude, man up, right? You
That
know,
was kind of my attitude too when I saw it happen around me. Sure.
yeah. And so it's so devastating because those of us that are bullied are almost always the most productive, loyal, devoted people in the workplace. It's not the apathetic people, they don't get bullied. And it's not the toughest ones who the boss senses might attack back. It's those of us who they know are just going to go back and try harder. And that's really what happens. And so, to your point, and the point that I want to make is that if you think your boss has your back, that's not really bullying. But the problem is that so often what happens is you feel like the boss not only doesn't have your back, but is stabbing you in the back. And let me make the point that you made very specifically. I came to New York to do television. Okay, wow, tough, and I think harmful in many ways. But as I was doing my book, what I realized is that where there are people at work, there are bullies at work. It's true in technology. It's true in construction, in healthcare, in the legal profession, in technology. Everywhere there are people, there are bullies. So no, it may be marginally worse in media, but I would suggest it's everywhere and it's bad everywhere, and nobody deserves to be mistreated or abused in the workplace. And can I make one more real quick point?
Yeah, of course.
This notion of we're not talking about harassment. That's where civil rights codes can protect you. So if someone says, like in my case, hey, old man, you're over 50, we don't need your old ideas anymore. Or hey, N-word person, or any, if it's gender, it's disability, it's
Sure.
age, sexual preference. There are laws against that. There's absolutely no laws against the kind of harm we're talking about currently on the books. It's completely legal to attack somebody and hurt their well-being, their financial prospects. That's an abuse of power, and that's what I'm going after.
Wow. So, as I said earlier before we started rolling, I've always, seen the word bully as associated with kids, middle school, high school kids who are picked on and bullied because they're different in some way. And, bullying of kids has been associated with so much awful stuff, everything from mental illness to school shooters to suicide, bullying in person, bullying on social media. So it was an eye opener to me that not only that you ascribed that word to adults in the workplace, but that there is actually a body of work that studies this and has over the years. Talk a little bit about what you discovered and where you discovered it as you were researching this book.
Yeah. First off, let me say that in the first probably 2 pages of my book, I talk about the zero tolerance policy at my kids' schools and in schools across the country. Zero tolerance for bullying.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, and so many millions of people's experiences, there's 100% tolerance of bullying in the workplace. So when I started this work, I found the Workplace Bullying Institute, which has been studying this issue for 30 years and trying to get laws passed, which they have not been successful.
And they have a website. Here it is, Workplace Bullying Institute. They call themselves the WBI, and they've been around for a long time.
Yeah. And I talked to kind of a mentor of mine and the guy that started me on this journey, on this mission, if you will, a guy named Dr. Gary Namey. And as soon as I got on the phone with him, I just picked up the phone and called him. I had no idea this was a thing. When I started writing my book, I thought there was something wrong with me, Tom, that I brought this on, that there was something about me that was cloying or too ambitious, or maybe I was annoying. And we talk about bullying. I start off my book too talking about I never got bullied as a kid. I was a 3-sport athlete. I was a trumpet player. I was popular, good student. But I realized later, and it's in my book, but that's the wrong approach. That's the wrong thesis because nobody deserves to be bullied. I was making the point, look at me. I was an athlete. But the ballerina, the male ballerina in the high school doesn't deserve to be bullied. Nobody deserves to be bullied.
Right.
And so that was the wrong analysis on my part. So when I talked to Dr. Gary Namey, 10 seconds into the conversation, he goes, "Let me see if I know you." And I had never spoken to him in my life. And he said, I alluded to this earlier. He goes, "I bet you really try hard, that you were productive, that your colleagues liked you, all these things." How'd you know? He goes, "You're a bully target."
Hmm.
That's how I knew. So they've done all kinds of research. And the one thing that I wanted to point out here and relatively early in our conversation is 2024's Zogby Analytics study commissioned by the Workplace Bullying Institute, nationally recognized survey. 50 million people in this country, this was the end of 2024, 50 million people in this country identify as bullying victims in the previous 6 months.
32% of adult Americans are bullied
Correct.
at work, according to that
Yeah.
survey, which is really a kind of a staggering number.
Yes. And another 15 million say they've seen it and it affects them. Maybe they weren't the direct target, but they see it in their workplace. So this is, I think your word is quite a good one, a staggering number. And let me tell you something else. When I started this work, I was shocked to find other people that had been bullied. Shocked. I'm like, I can't believe, and these people are bright and nice and smart. And I'm like, you too? Well, now, 5 years later, I'm shocked when I meet somebody who says, yeah, that never happened to me.
Hmm.
Everybody I meet over and over again, maybe more severe, less severe, everybody says to me, oh, I can't wait to tell you what happened to me.
Yeah. So I spent a little time on the WBI website, the Workplace Bullying Institute, and here's their definition. Workplace bullying is repeated health harming mistreatment by one or more employees of an employee. Abusive conduct that takes the form of verbal abuse or behaviors perceived as threatening, intimidating, or humiliating. Work sabotage. That one jumped out at me. That's like this is your work, but it's not recognized as your work, or somebody steals the credit for your work, or in some combination of the above. So you, according to the book, you've pretty much experienced every single one of these things. I want to talk just a little bit about a couple of the examples you have. We talked a little bit. You were one of the first, well, I guess the first on TV producer for a legendary talk show host named Morton Downey Jr. I remember Morton Downey Jr., although I never watched his show regularly, but he was one of these first talk show hosts he pioneered the in your face, yelling and screaming, kind of belittling, kind of yelling at people. He was a conservative guy, which is really doesn't, means nothing for this context, but he was just kind of over the top. And based on your description, he was like that in person as well.
Yeah.
So
So
he
the
was a
show,
hard person to deal with, both off TV and on TV.
yes. On TV, it was a little bit of a performance,
Sure.
almost like for people that haven't seen it, and it was a while back, it was a little bit like WWE in a way, that in your face, kind of rehearsed, but vitriolic kind of anger.
Right.
He playing the kind of conservative role, anti-feminism, pro-Reagan at the time, pro-military, that kind of thing, anti-pornography. Uh, not much has changed. These issues, he was anti-abortion. This was all on the air, Tom.
But this was in a way, after a while, especially calculated because his show was getting numbers.
Oh, it was a phenomenon at the
Yeah,
time.
it really was. And so that became the trademark. And so, but behind the scenes, there's Andy, or as he called you, Weasel. Nice. He called you that from day one all the way until the end, right? Pretty
Yes,
much.
because I introduced myself to him the very first time we met in Chicago. I was his radio producer. Then I came to New York to do television
Yeah.
with him. I said, "Oh, my name's Andy Regal," and I was probably a little shy and soft spoken. And so he said, "Oh, is that Andy Weasel? Okay, Weasel." And that was that. Yes, but I often say that Mort treated me like a son oftentimes, and he oftentimes treated me like a son of a bitch. And he yelled and screamed and he fired me. And he was just as belligerent and bellicose off the air, sometimes more so than even he was on the air when he was screaming and pointing his finger at our guests on the air.
But you stayed with him.
Well, and that's again the bully target, right? That was me. I wanted to please him. In many ways, I loved him because that's, and really bosses, Tom, who has more power over us, more authority over us than our bosses?
Right.
Um, I talk about in the book, I created a television show with a North Carolina sheriff who ran a jail. He was out of central casting. And I thought, who has more power in your life than your boss who handles your self-esteem, your self-identity, your ability to pay your bills, as we talked about earlier, your popularity at work, how you feel about yourself when you go home because the bully boss's voice is either on your shoulder or in
Sure.
your head. And so I was always somebody, whether I had coaches, I wanted to please the coach. I wanted to please the boss. I wanted to please Mort. I wanted to please Steve Brill, who is in my book, who is the CEO of Court TV, who is a kind of a renowned bully. So that's who I am, and that's often the people that are targeted is the people who are just going to go sit back down and try harder to make the person happy.
And so you moved from job to job to job over 20 plus years. And in each one of these places, you eventually ran into somebody who, in their own way, bullied you, bullied other people. And how long did it take you to finally to have it click in that, like, this is fucked up?
Yeah,
And when to finally say enough is enough, or, did that ever happen really?
it never happened.
No.
It never happened. I blamed myself. And that's when and the regurgitations, the throwing up started early with Morton in the control room. I talk about that. But then I couldn't keep down food for years. Uh,
Really?
but I didn't realize it was tension filled.
Hmm.
I did realize that I was depressed. I did realize that I had terrible anxiety.
So you
But
didn't
then,
attribute it directly to bullying or to the behavior of a boss?
no, I
You
attribute
saw
it.
it as a weakness in yourself.
Correct. A weakness in myself and a weakness to live up to what was required of me
Wow.
in a deadline culture where I needed to get ratings. I wanted to win Emmys. And in fact, I'd much rather be going on your show talking about the Emmys I won instead of getting my ass kicked. But I even would walk into new jobs. I had to get jobs because I would lose jobs for a
Hmm.
variety of
Yeah,
reasons.
you spent a lot of time looking for jobs.
Yeah.
A lot of
And
time.
yeah, and uh, I'd have the bully boss in my head going to the next interview, which is why it's so damaging because you lose your self-esteem, you lose your
Yeah.
value. And so that's why I'm doing this work now because I never realized that this was a thing. I never realized it was something other than me. And now I'm trying to get the word out to all bullying victims and bosses too, if they're listening, that we can make it better. We can change the workplace for good. And there are ways that we can do that. And the first thing I tell, and I have a coaching business where I work with people who have been damaged by this. The first thing I do was the first thing that Gary Namey did for me. First, no self-blame,
Hmm.
absolutely no self-blame involved, and it's not your fault, and you can cope and heal. These are the first things that we do and we talk about because no, it never occurred to me that it was anything other than my fault and my inability to handle the culture.
That sounds like the advice kids get when their parents get divorced. No, this is not your fault, right? It's not your fault.
Well, and there is a
Keep
little bit
your
of
head
that,
up.
right? But it is. I think it's true. Like when somebody breaks up, I think what you're alluding to, they say, well, it's not you, it's me. But it really is true that this is so much more, Tom, about in some ways the bully than it is about us. The bully, whether it's egoism, sadism, they had a bad upbringing. It doesn't matter, but there's reasons why bully bosses act out, and in most cases, it has very little to do with us because we're the good guys, and
Well,
we are.
not only that, it's not our job as employees to diagnose these guys and to try to figure that out. That's not our problem.
Correct.
So you say this also in your book and somewhere on your website. And, I learned this really in AA meetings more than any place else. We can't control other people. We can't control Donald Trump. We can't control our family members. We can't control what other people do. All we can control is how we react to them and what we do in response to that. So that's kind of the baseline for the way you say deal with these bullies? I mean, how do you do that without, without recalling 100 pages of your book? Give us kind of the thumbnail sketch of how you start to do that.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity because this is the most important thing to me and why I'm so passionate about this advocacy. So let me start, if I may, and feel free to interrupt me because this is going to take a bit. There's two sides of this,
Mhm.
and I'd like to start on the corporate or organizational side. It's so simple. This is not, to your point, this is not trying to solve the conflict in Tehran or the conflict in the Ukraine. Or solving for or curing cancer. This is a problem that we can ameliorate, that we can mitigate tomorrow. So all we have to do is create codes of conduct that are codified, codes of behavior that are codified in the workplace. It's a one page. Every business can put together how they expect people to treat one another in the workplace, just like we do with sexual harassment, right? Almost every job I've ever had, maybe every job I've ever had, you had to watch a video, do a questionnaire and then
Right.
sign
Check off
on.
and sign the piece of
Exactly.
paper.
Now, of course, that was all about liability.
Right.
They don't do that because there's no laws against it, but we should do the same thing with how we treat one another. And then, and it will happen when people don't follow those codes of conduct, the person has to be brought in and there has to be repercussions. Maybe not the first time, but over time, that has to be part of their review, part of their bonus, part of their promotion opportunity. And if they do it over and over again, they need to be let go. And that has to be from the top down. Now, the other thing is on the personal level. We're not going to make our bully bosses our best friends. And you can't just march in there. People always say to me, either one, why did you stay?
Yeah.
Well, because I had a mortgage for one thing. And plus,
Right.
I had worked my ass off for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years to get where I got. And I don't want the bully to win. And I don't have the luxury of walking out. But the other thing is, we have to be able to figure out a way that we can work together because not only is it harmful to the employee, the American Psychological Association has estimated that $300 billion are lost every year by virtue of workplace bullying because it's retention, absenteeism, lack of production, healthcare costs. All these things play into why we need to make a change. And so what we can do individually, and then I'll shut up because I want to hear your next question. We, we forgive me for going on and on,
I
but
don't want you to shut up. Keep
okay.
going. This is why we're
Well,
here.
this is the most important thing. We can't change our bully boss. We can't, and we shouldn't try, in my view. You can do it. You can march in there and tell them to F off, but I don't suggest that because I don't want to be responsible for somebody losing their job.
Yeah. It's
So
not going to work anyway.
what I work with my clients is we work on things like reestablishing your psychological safety. Most of us, many of us who are bully victims, we feel unsafe at work at any moment, the next email, the next text, the next meeting.
Sure.
I work with my clients on rediscovering our self-esteem, which we can do. We talk about letting other voices come into your head, not allowing the bully boss to wholly establish your self-esteem. We work on purpose of work and life, having purpose without letting the bully boss take that away from you. Reigniting joy so you don't lose all your joy in life. And then two other quick things. We work on positive self-talk because, again, that bully boss is, you're ruminating. And we work on forgiveness, which is another crucial aspect to getting over this because the bully boss just becomes the one voice in your head.
Sure. Sure. Well, you mentioned earlier codes of conduct that exist in school districts, right? There's a zero tolerance for bullying, and then that's catching on now as we see the effects of it on kids. Wouldn't that work for the corporate setting?
Of course, and nobody has them. And that's why I'm so excited about this issue. When I started this issue, Tom, and you can appreciate this as someone in broadcasting, I looked for something that obviously mattered to me, but also where there was an underserved audience and where we could have a solution. I don't have solutions for the big issues in the world, but this is a big issue that can be changed in a moment's notice. Like I said, they've been trying for 30 years to get state legislatures to put something on the books that would help
Sure.
victims and give them some recourse. And I'm in favor of that. In lieu of that, we can just have a one sheet and the CEO has to abide by it and honor it. That's all. And then people will begin to say, okay, this is how we're supposed to comport ourselves. I'll tell you one other quick thing. There's a thing called a brilliant jerk. in the work we do. And I had one, a guy who looked like a football player. He's in the book. And not only did he look like a football player, he was a football player. Really handsome, great teeth, 6'4", 220. Looked great in a suit. The CEO loved to have him by his side. And the guy was very smart and very good at what he did. The problem was he made us all miserable.
Mm.
And I'll speak for myself, he made me miserable. I'll tell you a quick anecdote, if I may.
Sure.
Real quick. He's my new direct manager because my boss got fired. The boss that I loved, one of the few I ever had. Okay, he's 10 years my junior. I have no problem with that. Believe me, I would tell you if I did, I didn't. He starts micromanaging me. He tells me that he wants me to CC him on every email. I'm 40 years old.
Mm.
I've had multi-million-dollar budgets. I've had 40-person staffs. He wants me to CC him.
He
Why?
wants to micromanage you suddenly, right?
Yeah, because I believe he wants to control me and he doesn't want me to succeed too much.
Mm.
He didn't really know video, but he was very bright and very good at what he did. I decide I'm going to ask him out to lunch. Two guys, let's go out to lunch, get away from the office, and just get on a better footing. My heart's thumping as I'm thinking about asking him to lunch. Can you imagine? I'm 40 years old. He's 30, or maybe I'm 42, he's 32. And yet I'm nervous about asking someone, a supervisor. I finally kind of peek into his office because I don't want to walk all the way in. He looks up at me without any and I just said, "Hey, can we grab lunch? Maybe talk about some programming ideas?" He looks at me without expression. He says, "Regal, we don't need to fucking break bread. You just need to do your fucking
Oh,
job."
I remember that story. Yeah.
Now, the reason I mention that is because when we started talking, my definition is no benefit to the employee or the business. How did that benefit me? He had never criticized my work before then. Nothing. Nothing. How did that help me? How did that help the business? I walked back demoralized, he was like a general or a
Oh, of
sergeant
course.
missing the private, and we never spoke again. I was there for another 3 or 4 months. The company got sold, but we never spoke again. Chilling effect, demoralized, and it was painful to be treated that way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
very painful.
Yeah. So you said it took you 5, 6 years to write the book, right? I'm interested in the process that you went. Did you just wake up one day and say, start writing? Do you have a little place in your house where you like dim the lights and put Miles Davis on and start writing? Or how did you do it? And how did you
Well,
decide to start?
as a trumpet player myself, I do love Miles Davis, and I'm sure I did at some point. But
Of course you do.
yeah, love Miles Davis. I would sit on my deck when the weather was nice, and for the first time in my life, because like many jobs, being in television was all encompassing for me.
Yeah.
I cared so much. So I was working 12, 14, 16-hour days throughout my career. I can't even remember my 30s. I remember I hit 40 and I'm like, what happened to my 30s? I couldn't remember anything that I did that was fun. It was just television. So I sat down because during COVID, I still had a job, but they weren't watching me. And frankly, and I can say it now, I had about 2 hours of work a day for the first time in my life because nobody was watching me and the job was easy, but I was a full-time job. So I said, I'm going to write a book. And I wrote a book. It was basically a memoir. And I showed it to somebody. After about a year, I had a first draft. And someone said, well, Andy, it's a good story, but nobody cares that much about you.
Nice.
And they were right. And that's when I decided to make this more of a journalistic and broader based approach on bullying. And that's when in my book, I interviewed dozens of experts worldwide about this issue, how it's impacting people both from a psychological and physiological point of view.
Well, I read somewhere, maybe it was your website, that you also wanted to leave something for your kids. You wanted to leave a legacy that wasn't just, your days with Morton Downey and all your shitty experiences. You wanted to leave them the story of your life. And it was in the process of writing that it occurred to you that, oh my God, look at all these freaking guys who I worked with, right? Is that
Totally
part of
true.
it?
I wanted, and I've made an effort in my parenting. My kids are teenagers now, but late teenagers. I wanted them to be better prepared for the workplace than I ever was. My dad was a lawyer, and he was at the same firm for 40 years. And once in a while, he'd complain about a judgment in a case he was working on, but everything seemed fine all the time. And I wanted my kids to know that I was a failure. Oftentimes, I failed and that I lost jobs and that I was unemployed. I just spent more time talking about those things than any of the positive things that happened to me in my career.
Mm.
And that's why that was my initial reason for writing the book. And my kid, but then I decided, you know what, maybe I can have even more benefit to people by bringing up this issue that seems to be at best taboo, and at worst an epidemic. And maybe I can have a positive impact at this point in my career on both individual employees and entire workplaces.
Gotcha. So I've interviewed quite a few authors who've written memoirs in various forms, short stories, essays, their entire life story. And what propelled me through your book in 2 days of reading was what propelled me through every other good memoir, which is, it's not just a recitation of a resume and I did this and then I did this and then I did this. It's the effect of that stuff on you as a person and how I relate to that as the reader, right? That's what makes a good memoir. It's not just, don't just tell me all this, your freaking resume. Tell me what that did to you and how I can relate to that. And, being bullied at work is, now going to be part of my lexicon. I probably, of the many bosses I had in news and elsewhere, not just news, I probably had one, maybe two who kind of fit that description. The last guy who fired me at CBS, I never used that description, but somebody after I was fired came up to me, somebody who I worked with said, he's just a bully. Don't worry about it. And I kind of let it go, but, and I'm not sure I even want to examine it all that closely, but yeah, I think this is a subject that is near to and dear to a lot of people. So the book is not officially out until the end of April, correct?
Correct. The date of actual publication is April 28th, but it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble.
So you can pre-order it now, right?
Yeah. And yes, so they'll be shipping out books very quickly around April 28th.
All right. So the book is called Surviving Bully Culture, a career spent navigating workplace bullying and a guide for healing. And not only do we have the book, but you have your services available as speaker, coach. I mean, if you go to andyregal.com, you'll see all the stuff that you do, but you make yourself available quite liberally to talk to people. And do you do kind of seminars, coaching? What do you do exactly?
Yeah, I do one-on-one coaching, and the stories are just horrible. People who have become suicidal. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a crisis therapist. I want to make that very clear. But people come to me and I hear these stories every day about the damage done. Great people, wonderful people, hardworking people. So I do one-on-one coaching. I will in the fall have a group coaching opportunity. And I just want to help in this arena and make a difference. So if I may, I have a guide completely free, a bullying recovery guide, and you can get it at bullyingrecoveryguide.com. And it is basically my 6 tenets of coping and healing, which are the kind of groundwork that I do, the tentpole aspects of how I work with people to help them cope and heal from what can be a traumatic situation. That's what happens. I mean, I'm still dealing with this stuff that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. It gets in your long-term memory because it's trauma. Feel free to reach out to me if they'd like to talk further. You said my website, andyregal.com, and I'd just love to talk to anybody in your audience that is suffering and or anybody that runs a company and wants some guidance on how they can put the right culture in place, because that's the way we can help the most people in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, there you go. AndyRegal.com is a good place to start, folks. It's all there. And bullyingrecoveryguide.com. It's a mouthful, but you can figure it out. And hey, it's free. What's better than that?
Right.
So, yeah. And the book will be available, or it's available for pre-order now in all the usual places, right? Amazon, I think, did you say Barnes and Noble?
Barnes and Noble. If you want, you can get a slight discount at my publisher, amplifypublishing.com, amplifypublishinggroup.com if you want to get it there too. It's available there now if you like.
Great. This was a really illuminating subject for me. I'm going to start going back and thinking about some of my work experiences. I appreciate you being with me very much. Andy Regal, author of Surviving Bully Culture. Folks, check it out. And Andy, thanks so much.
Tom, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity. And you're a total pro. Great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.